Good
And
afternoon,
yeah,
everybody, and thanks for tuning in. John Kelly, profiler here, and welcome. It's good to have you all. Today we're going to be talking about Rachel Morin. Who killed Rachel Morin? Today's show is going to be Catching a Killer. Okay, we're going to be talking about catching the killer of Rachel Morin. At this point in time, I want to introduce Dustin. Okay, you've probably met Dustin Ranck before. You've seen him on here. He's a licensed private investigator, worked with them on a number of cases so far. We're very happy and thrilled to have him. He's a real pro, really knows his way around, really knows his way around the streets. And at this time, I want to send out our condolences from all of us, to all of Rachel Morin's family and friends and children. It's extremely important that we get this guy because he'll kill again. And I can't even imagine what her children and the rest of her family is going through. I don't want to see any other families go through it. So with that being said, right now I'd like to introduce Dustin Ranck. Dustin, you sent me some interesting stuff. Can you go over it on the sketch? When you saw the sketch, you wrote down some really interesting information. You want to talk about that?
sure, John. Yeah, thanks again for having me on. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here with you. Yeah, that sketch that's kind of an interesting thing, right? We had that event. I mean, it's been almost a year since that doorbell footage came out, right? And I think if we go back, we talk a lot, but I think if we went back, I think that we kind of, you and I had talking about, like, gosh, why wasn't there a fuller report made and all of this stuff? And, it's important to understand, there's a lot of way that crime gets reported. And there was also some comments, on your channel in legitimate comments about, like why or why not. Well, it lends a lot of credence to, I mean, first of all, you got to take into account where the area is. And I'm no way painting a broad stroke that the people that live in South LA are bad folks or not. It's actually a really great working class neighborhood, but it's chock full of gangs. I mean, like you wouldn't believe it, and those gangs are not, they've evolved way past the point of, the 1950s and the 1960s where, kind of locally run stuff. I mean, that stuff's all being run like by cartels and by the prisons, and it's big business. I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars, dope moving in and out, and all kinds of other criminal activity, especially now that you've got computers and stuff. Well, imagine, if you've got this family and you've got this event, of course you're, it boggles my mind that some guy that wouldn't be from that area, if it would just randomly roam into that house because of the high degree of gang activity. I mean, that's just, gosh, John, it's just a death sentence, because you just don't know whose house you're getting into. And
Good
just imagine,
point.
yeah, you got to imagine, like, this family's got this younger, kid, a daughter, whatever. Of course they're not going to drop a dime and get mixed up with that while they're still living there. I mean, the guy already, he's certainly not bashful about getting inside the house. And, your average person's not going to hire a 24/7 private security team to escort you around. And even that, if a gang is plugged in enough, that's not going to do you any good. I'm just here to, let people that don't know that if they want a piece of you, they're going to get it. They've got the resources, they've got the money, and they can make pretty much anything happen that they're going to want to make happen. So the fact that it's taken a while for this sketch to come out, and I'm glad it is. I mean, it takes an incredible amount of courage to do that, no matter who you are or where you live, because it opens the doors for a lot of things, from a criminal justice perspective and just a safety issue too. I mean, gangs are not located just in large cities anymore. Back when we were kids, John, you had the big urban centers. You had LA and New York and, some stuff in Texas around, Houston and stuff, moving dope. In Chicago, obviously, like the big hubs, Seattle maybe. But nowadays, it's important to remember, this stuff is tentacled out to every town, to every city, every small town, every burg. I mean, there are fingers everywhere. So, my hat, I'm just amazed that they came out, and started talking to law enforcement. I think that goes to show you how important it is to that family. They've got themselves, I think, probably into a safer situation at this point, hopefully. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I'm really proud of them for doing it, because this guy's been on the run. I mean, geez, John, it's been a year, and you got to think about it, of all the video surveillance that we've got and social media, and hell, we got video of this dude leaving the house, for nobody to recognize this guy or to have a sighting of this guy. I mean, as far as I can tell, I think there's been one or two instances of law enforcement maybe catching a lead somewhere, but for the most part, the trail's it's been pretty cold.
Mhm.
And yeah, and you called this out, John. I mean, we've talked about it personally, but you called it out in one of your reels going back a few weeks or a month or something, about this guy having gang affiliation. And I know that that was also a topic. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. It's not the color of his skin or anything, but it's the place, the geographic area that kind of dictates, because there's all kinds of gangs in that area. It's not just, African American or Latino or white. There's a lot going on there, and there's alliances, there's feuds. It's a pretty heavy deal. So the fact that nobody's dropped a dime on this guy for almost a year, man, he's got to have some kind of connection. He might not look like a gangbanger, which kind of leads me to another point, John. We got this guy, he's athletically built, he's good looking. This guy, if he is in a gang, there's a high degree of probability that he's not a street soldier,
Mhm.
you know, and it could play out in a couple of different ways. He could be, it kind of in the business end of it, making things happen, but it would be kind of weird that this dude's doing a B&A and then a high profile murder. Because you got to remember, it's one thing for gang members to take out other gang members. I mean, it happens every single day in these big cities, right? But for some guy to go rogue and start breaking into people's houses, then going out to the East Coast and committing a high profile, brutal murder against Rachel Morin, that's not usually something gangs are, unless they got a specific beef with somebody, that brings a lot of heat to the neighborhood. It brings a lot of attention that they don't want. Now they're willing to take some of that heat to do business and to make points and to keep their status. That's a big deal out there. But we got some guy, man. He's off the grid, and he's doing whatever. But the fact that you brought up this guy, and I think the term you used was ganged up, and that made a lot of sense to me, knowing guys that I have through the tattoo business, and how they move around and how they, kind of conduct business. I mean, this is an enterprise. And like I said, they've got fingers, they've got connections, they might not have, a set in a particular city, but you better believe that they've got people they do business with. And if this guy's moving around as free as he is, I mean, yeah, at this point he could have been shuttled out of the country, which that leads into a whole other thing too. Because if this guy's got a legit passport, and he's moving through customs or something, moving through the airports, I mean, of course the law enforcement's looking at that. That's the main, modality that people are going to get out of the country, a plane or a train, but even a car. You've got, you got border agents, you got all kinds of stuff. So it leads me to believe that he's got some juice, man, which really ups the stake. And you've said this a million times, this guy is really dangerous, and I 100% believe that for sure.
Something you mentioned, or something I want to mention. First of all, really, you are a very good artist.
Oh, thanks.
And I think if there's anybody to kind of look and see if they can glean anything from this sketch, it's you. And in saying you're a really great artist, we're going to put a link up to your artwork. Okay.
Okay.
So
Thanks,
we want
John.
to remember that. I mean, really, really, you've been an artist for many years too. And,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So who better to kind of take a look at this sketch? Do you see anything on that sketch that jumps out at you? I mean, visually or anything that grabs at you from that sketch? There he is with the baseball cap on and all.
Yeah, it does stand out to me, John. And the reason it stands out to me is that it's, you see a lot of, if we kind of go back in the crime world, because artist sketches of suspects is, it's not a new thing. And of course, now we've got new technology and stuff, but that sketch is extremely detailed. It is extremely detailed. And one of the exercises that we used to use, and the art world does it too, but we would do it in the tattoo studio. There's kind of two methodologies to that: is learning to draw what you see, but you're also drawing from ear, having somebody create a description. And in our studio, since it was a custom thing, oftentimes we would sit down with a sketch pad and we would have to kind of talk through it. And for that sketch to be that detailed, you know, somebody had to get a really good look at this guy,
Mm.
and that kind of brings me back to, this LA thing that happened almost a year ago. Somebody got a good look at that guy and they have put those details to paper, because it's important to remember when you're receiving information from somebody verbally, like, to give you an example, in the tattoo shop, sometimes you'd be sitting with somebody and they'd say, "Hey, I want something that's really funky and really geometric." You'd be like, "Yeah, okay," and you start kind of sketch something that's got some angles to it, and it's got a little, maybe a little bit of a math bend to it or something. It's a little more kind of engineering based or something. But really what they're trying to say is they want something a little more nebulous and organic. So the fact that that sketch is so detailed tells me that not only the person that's taken the information has done a fantastic job, but the person giving it is also very clear about what they're describing, right? Because you don't get that level of detail with just, the guy's got a face and he's got a pair of eyes. Because as you're drawing stuff, and I've done a lot of portraiture, just not just for tattooing, but you might be sitting with somebody, back in the old days when if you were doing something complicated, like a portrait in the tattoo world, hell, you'd be sitting in a, hotel room with some dude. He's got like a blurry photograph from the 50s. And you have to unwind that. You have to go back and you have to create the details from the story. So it's to be able to get all the way there with it is really intriguing to me. And I think that's probably a pretty good rendition of what this dude looks like. And, we've all seen, I mean, if we even go back to Delphi, those initial sketches, I mean, yeah, man, those, those things could have been anybody, you know what I mean? And that
They
was,
were everybody, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And now we've got, yeah, obviously it's probably rendered in Photoshop, but I think that's fantastic. I'm not bagging on that technology at all. I think the better you can create a visual image, the more photographic quality you can bring to it, to bring those details out, is super duper important. Because, if you're sitting with somebody and you're working like that, they might not know, let's say you're working with a eye detail, because it's such a prominent thing on the face. I mean, obviously faces are prominent. They're kind of the leading edge of when you meet somebody. That's the first thing that you look at, etc. So the fact that we've got this incredible detail and we've got this great description, somebody might not know, as you're sitting there with them, they might not know exactly, they might not have total recall. I mean, I've got a pretty good photographic memory when it comes to details like that, just because I've had a lot of practice.
You do. You have an excellent photographic memory.
Well, thank you. Yeah, but now we've got a young person who's been traumatized, but I think that lends a lot of credibility to whoever, whatever agency created this rendition of this suspect. Because if you're not listening, and you say this all the time about the work that you do, and even about, people that you've interviewed, just let them talk. Let them talk. Because as you're sitting there sketching, yeah, of course, you'll start to develop it, they might not have the total recall as to what exactly that guy looks like, but they'll know exactly what he doesn't look like. And once you hone in on that, boom, now that you know that, okay, that eye's too round, or it's too narrow, or, the nose is too broad, or, the facial structure, boom, okay, cool. I can work with what it's not, sometimes better than I can work with what it is. Because now I can start to shift and move things around, because when they see it, it's going to trip in their mind. In my case, it would be a customer, but in this case, a law enforcement, we got this victim. Man, when that sketch artist hit on that sketch and it was okayed, you got to believe that that is really close to what this guy is going to look like in real life. There's just no question in my mind.
Put an age graph kind of together here. Would you say 22 to 30, 30? I know nothing about this. Okay, let me get straight this.
Yeah.
But just, how far out? How far out do we go? Do we go 20 to 35? Do we go, 25 to 35? I mean, just off the top of your head, based on your experience, and we're not going to hold you to it, certainly.
Yeah, yeah.
But what's your guesstimate on him, age-wise?
Uh, it's certainly like anywhere from the kind of mid 20s to mid 30s would be my initial guess. And that's not just based on the sketch, it's based on the doorbell footage. There's guys even where I go to school that, hell, everybody there's younger than me, but, that are in their early 20s, but they're, athletes, they're built. So they don't necessarily look older, but they're a little more filled out. So, they can kind of carry themselves a little differently. One of the things that really strikes me too, John, is I'm curious when the artist sat down with them. One of the things that I would use a lot when trying to receive information from, obviously you're asking a lot of questions, and you get the dialogue open, because the more we talk together, the more information we're going to have, and the more accurate of a product we're going to get, or a tattoo, or whatever we're doing. Is I'm curious if, and I'm sure they've thought of this. But nothing that I've been able to find has been released. I'm curious if there's anything I'm curious about this guy's manner of speech, because there was a language on the street. There's kind of a cadence to it a lot of times, and there's slang that these guys will use. And makes me wonder if, man, maybe what did he say anything to the victim? If he did, what did he say? How was the delivery? That would tell us a lot. Has he got some education? Is this guy, working the streets, on a daily basis? Because those are going to be two distinctly different modes of communication. You know what I'm saying? And
Absolutely.
yeah. And it all kind of goes back to, I'm curious where this guy's been. And that sketch tells me a lot. He's not inked up. He's obviously, he's spending money getting his hair done somewhere. He's professionally cut. He looks like he's in good shape. He's a young dude. Man, that opens up for me as just a visual person, somebody that's not working the streets on a daily basis, because he's not going to have the same kind of street cred that a soldier's going to have. When you meet a true street soldier, it doesn't mean he could be in a club, he could be in a gang, he could be anything, but they need you to know that, because their life depends on it when they're working the streets, and they're doing crazy stuff. They're making deals, they're, extorting money, whatever it is that they're doing. So that's part, I'm sorry, go ahead. It looked like you were going to
No,
say
no,
something.
no. Finish.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to that branding thing we talked about with Chadwell, how he, was trying so hard to be a badass. It was a diversion tactic, obviously on his part, but that same goes true on the streets. But those guys will back it up. Yeah, it's sending a message, but they're standing behind it. That is their rep. They're dressing down with the ink, the colors they wear, the types of clothes that they wear, how they wear their clothes, how they stand, how they engage with each other visually. There's a lot of quiet language that goes on there in that world too. So it just makes me wonder, man. I got to believe law enforcement did ask her, like what was said, what did he threaten her? If so, how? What did he threaten this victim with? That would say a lot too. But that sketch, yeah, I'd put that guy, you know, mid-20s, mid-30s. I can't see him getting past that. I mean, it's possible, but yeah, gosh, you just don't see a lot of guys in their, say their 40s, looking that tight with the hair and good, running around committing burglaries. I mean, I know they do, but if you ever, and I know you have, John, but I'm just kind of putting this out there for the audience. I mean, I got a lot of friends in jail, and when you go visit them in jail, the guy's got to look, So I kind of just have a hard time picturing this guy being an older person and being kind of that clean cut doing a burglary, so kind of bring his age back a little bit, maybe having that impulsiveness of a young man. And we know for a fact, John, we know this because just those two events, and I know you've said this before, and I think it too. It hard to believe that this is this guy's first rodeo, home invasion and gang territory and a broad daylight brutal murder. Like, come on, man, that dude's in this stuff for the action, big time, whatever that
Yeah,
action is for. But man, oh man, that's a dangerous individual for sure.
very, very, very dangerous. And you hit the nail on the head. For this personality in a serial killer between mid-20s, mid-30s, like that, I mean, that's when they start. Okay,
Right.
for this type of killer. Okay, that's when they start. So, yeah, it's like maybe not his first rodeo breaking an entry, maybe not his first rodeo murdering. Little sophistication I see, but I don't see a lot of sophistication. I see a lot of impulsivity, right? I see a lot of risk, right? But then again comes the urge. Okay, one
Yeah.
thing I've learned, and when these guys get that sexual urge, okay, and they covet what they see, they want to grab somebody, and they want to
Mhm.
sexually dominate that person. I mean, there's nothing going to stop them. I mean, they could be, on a street with cars going by. I mean, we see it more and more. They're getting caught earlier, by cameras and stuff. They'll make a move. They just can't control that urge. It's like a heroin
Yeah.
addict with a bag of heroin hanging out, looking at them. You know what I mean? They cannot control that urge. They have to move. And really, when you talk about impulsivity, these guys really don't have very much impulse control at all, especially in the beginning. The other thing I wanted to bring out was the baseball cap and everything, which I mentioned before, I think a little bit, but when you see this baseball cap and you see the way it is worn on his head. Now, in the sketch, they have the baseball cap worn correctly with the peak of the cap in the front and everything. Michael Jordan kind of Nike hat with a Michael Jordan kind of logo on the back of it or whatever, or on the front. So when you look at that cap, I mean, is that the way gang members wear a cap, or do they wear it backwards, or it doesn't matter? They wear it either way. Because I'm wondering what the trend is today on how you would wear a cap to look cool, backwards or on perfectly.
It depends a little bit, it kind of runs the gamut depending on where you are, kind of depends on the gang that you're dealing with. But yeah, I mean, sometimes they do wear it backward, back in my day, especially, if we go back to LA 70s and 80s, the big deal is wearing it kind of how I wear a cap. I wear one because my eyes are so light sensitive and where
Mhm.
I live, the sun's out all the time. So, but a lot of, especially for Southern California, typically they'd wear it with the visor forward, but flipped up, and they usually write, like the set that they belong to, or maybe the streets that they're claiming, or the neighborhood that they're claiming on that as an identifier. Yeah, sometimes they'll wear it to the side or to the back, but it's a little hard to tell. Some of these street soldiers nowadays, man, I mean, there's always kind of been an error of that. You know, if we go back to especially early like Latino gangs, and those guys dress really sharp. You know,
Mhm.
really, they press shirts, press pants. You know, there's an old saying. I used to work with some of those guys down in Los Angeles way back in the days, going back over 30 years. And they were a great group of guys, but man, they were really proud of how they looked, like clothes were new, they were nice, smelled good, like, but man, I mean, but they slung down with tattoos and, they were heavy into crime and heavy into dope. But yeah, they're really that appearance. So the way that, I see that sketch, which is kind of interesting because that I had read a article out of San Antonio, I think, um, that kind of mentioned a couple of the sources, and one of them that law enforcement may have gotten an eyewitness from Maryland, also out there with Rachel Morin. So that guy was either wearing a cap in LA, but he didn't leave with it, or he was wearing it out in Maryland. It's not that uncommon. It is kind of a way for people to blend, especially if he really digs his haircut. He might be wearing a hat just to, because it's very distinct. It's not uncommon, it's not an uncommon hairstyle for a young guy to be sporting, but if he's not growing it out and he's not shaving it, he might be wearing it just to kind of take one of the visual cues, because that would be something that anybody from that doorbell footage would recognize right out of the gate. Boom, haircut. Now it might be on any number of people, but without the facial recognition, it's hard to say. So he could have just been using it as a little bit of a diversion. So,
And that's where they supposedly, that's where they got the DNA because he left the house without the cap.
mhm.
But looking at this guy's build, which looks like he plays sports or he's been involved in at least. I mean, he got Rachel Morin on a jogging trail. He was so we know maybe he's a runner, possibly a runner. We know he likes a basketball cap. Michael Jordan, that's something athletic. Running is athletic. Um, you look at the guy to the doorbell shot, you look at his body looks athletic, right? Like he's getting his,
Mhm.
some good workout somewhere, cardio wise or whatever. So that's something for us to take into consideration too. And something else, with talking to the victim, early on, you mentioned, you would ask the victim, what they thought about the person or whatever. What did the person say? How'd they say it? Right? I mean, that would tell us a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the cops have all that. I'm sure law enforcement has all that. But you know what I like to do too with a victim? When I've talked and interviewed a couple of victims, I've asked them, what does the person smell like? What was their hygiene like?
Mhm.
Because I can find out, do you smell alcohol on his breath? Right? When you ask about the affect, like you brought up, that can tell you if the guy's on something, some other substance that's not smelling. And if he has a lot of body odor, that can tell you something too, that his hygiene's not good. He doesn't take care of himself. So what's that about? So there's a lot of different things that you can start to gather, that you can start to put into a profile. I think he's definitely not a newbie at stealing. I think he is a newbie though, as he's graduated to murder. There's no question about it. Now, the other thing we picked up on, Leah nailed this, and I think we're correct, but we're just going to throw this out there. Leah is going to put up a shot of him leaving the doorbell shot again. And it seems Leah has picked up on a necklace, on a
Mhm.
gold necklace. She picked up on a piece of a gold necklace around the guy's neck. So now we got a guy, or yeah. So now we got a guy that wears this, has worn this Michael Jordan cap. Which way we're not sure. Um, Leaving the house with seemingly having a gold necklace on as well. All right. So every every piece to the puzzle makes sense. Okay. I wonder if there were any jogging events, sporting events, that might have been around that area in Maryland at the time, or even LA at the time, where this guy lived in Maryland, went out to LA for like a half a marathon or a marathon or something, or, if this guy lived in LA, went out to Maryland for a marathon or something. I mean, there's something sportsy, physically fit
Sure.
about this guy. I mean, was he known in the gym? People, where do people know him from? I'd be looking at the gym. I'd be looking at jogging. He looks like a jock to me. That he could pick up a basketball. I mean, he looks pretty clean living too. I don't see traces of substance abuse or anything. So you put that together and it makes sense. Somebody that's involved in athletics, physically fit, might be jogging, might be playing basketball, doing both, doesn't show signs of any kind of substance abuse because, somebody that's obsessive about the way they look and their physical fitness, would stay away from substance abuse because, these guys are all about control and dominance. Don't forget the substance will take away a good portion of your control, and take you out of that perfect control zone. Okay. So, it's something we have to take a look at too. We have to keep our eyes focused on that, something else that I want to go over, and I thought was pretty interesting here. If you take a look at him coming out the door, he's supposed to also have a deformed ear, or something's wrong with his ear. Some people said that. We don't know how true it is. But now if you take a problem with the ear, whether he had it pierced up or whatever he had done, or something didn't work out, and it's deformed in some way, for whatever reason, you add that to the baseball cap or the basketball cap, the possible, golden chain, right? The physical fitness, okay. The probably putting some time into scoping out places he can rob, breaking an entry. I'm sure he's been involved in that before you graduate to running in a house on somebody and trying to grab them. I mean, you're definitely working your way up to that by doing maybe some B&Es where there's nobody around. And also, the whole voyeurism thing, the stalking, the scoping. Could have stalked this girl out in LA, could have stalked, Rachel Morin out in Maryland. I mean, we have to look. We have to look at this stuff. There's no question about it, Something else that I'm concerned about, and about 15% of these guys, I think it's a little bit more, but about 15% have a learning disability. He could have a learning disability, and, he goes through this break-in and this so-called assault, and then he forgets his hat, his Michael Jordan hat, is he caught up in the moment? Is he ADHD? Does he have some kind of attention deficit problem going on? I mean, that's evidence he left there, right? That's evidence he left. That's a newbie. That's not a sophisticated guy. But a lot of these guys do have learning disabilities. Okay. And some of them, can, have an attention deficit mixed in with other diagnoses as well. So I think if we add in a possible learning disability with this guy as well, along with what else we've said today, I think that might help, find out, give us an idea of who this guy is. People might know and say, well, he's not the brightest bulb in the tree, and then for whatever reason, could have a stuttering problem. He could have a speech impediment. I mean, and could have had it earlier in life, and maybe it's not so bad now, or maybe he still carries it with him. Because I'll tell you why. Frank Adamson, my partner, mentioned, he said, this guy reminds me with his brutality of Bundy. He said he really does, right? I mean, that's something for my partner, Frank Adamson, to say.
Yeah, yeah.
And for
Yep.
those that
Not
don't
afraid to
know,
travel too. Yeah.
Frank Adamson was the head of detectives and ran the Green River case out in Washington, where they caught Gary Ridgway. But he was the commander of the detectives. And for Frank to say that means something to me. I mean, I would, based on the brutality, right? So, you look at Bundy. Bundy had a speech impediment as a child. You wouldn't know it for later on in life. The guy worked on the helpline. He was on, talking to people. He actually, believe it or not, kept a couple people, I think, from jumping the bridge. But I mean, he really had a speech impediment when he was a child and got over it. So learning disabilities are something else that can be part and parcel with these guys. Not saying definitely. You gotta take it, we're putting the pieces of a puzzle together or a profile. We got to figure out, what else is probable, Again, I talked about the peeping and you mentioned the breaking and entry, and we talked about the, the risky behavior, and, how this guy just, went into a high-risk neighborhood. And see, this again, this points out can't be the brightest bulb in the tree or sharpest knife in the drawer, because this type of risky behavior, going into a house and in a high-risk area, you're that impulsive. I mean, and having to believe that he's seen, his target. Why would he go through all that trouble if he didn't want the target that bad, or have the urge to dominate that target, right? So we have to look at that. So we have to talk about a possible history of peeping, right? And not that it has to be a legal history of peeping, but people know he's a peeper, but he's never gotten caught or arrested for it, and I think that's something else we have to look at. What else do you see? Do you think we need to focus on?
I think that pretty much covers it kind of for now. Right now, the main thing I think is we got a sketch, which is absolutely fantastic, because now, it kind of takes things away from just being another statistic. Now you've got a face with this guy that has committed 2 crimes that we know of. One of them obviously is a murder. So, if he's still roaming around in the country, now we might start to, people might really start paying attention, because it's really hard to say. You can't really tell much from the doorbell footage. And of course, we don't have any, at least anything that's come out from Maryland in terms of any trail surveillance or anything like that has any better photographs. So I can only hope that now that we've got a face with this guy and this crime, these crimes, that, people are kind of doing their due diligence and just kind of keeping their eyeballs open, because somebody, I mean, this guy doesn't live in a vacuum. I mean, he has to interact with people one way or another. I don't care if he's going to the gas station or the grocery store doing his laundry. I mean, he's interacting with people somehow. Now, what we don't know is where is he spending his free time, and it kind of goes back to, is this guy being protected? Is he being holed up somewhere, and kind of kept safe? It's a little hard to say right now, but man, I think, in the next few weeks, or, as time kind of moves forward, we'll hopefully start to see, some more, stimulate some tips and start getting some traction, at least starting to put some of those pieces together about who this guy really is. At least, I mean, if we can narrow down his associations, there's, and I think you've said this a million times. I mean, this guy is, he's a young man. He's obviously, athletic build, good looking dude. This guy's got to have girlfriends. If this guy's had girlfriends, he's got ex-girlfriends. And even as a private investigator, man, if you want to know something about somebody, you go find the ex-girlfriends, you go find the ex-wife, because I'll tell you what, they'll tell you everything you wanted to know and more about the person you're looking for. They might not drop the dime on him for sure, because there's some safety concerns there a lot of times, because, these guys are brutal and they're abusers and, and up to all kinds of stuff. So they may not just, the guy leaves and they're just glad to get him out of their life. They don't want to continue on with having to interact with him either in a legal sense or having him come back and, brutalize them some more or abuse them some more or whatever it is. So, somebody knows this guy, and all I can say is, man, hopefully, you can make anonymous calls. And if anybody's watching, let somebody know, let law enforcement know, because they can track it down. Every little bit of information helps.
There's a big reward out there, waiting for somebody to call in and drop the dime and put the finger on this guy, because he will kill again. As I'm sitting here in this chair, hey, this guy, if he is not caught, will definitely kill again. Getting back to what I talked about earlier, I think it's important about the guy might have been a peeper, might have had, been scoping some places out to do some B&Es, whatever, that whole voyeurism kind of trip, if you will, right? But lots of times, if they get caught doing something like that, okay, they plead it down. They plead their crime down to trespassing. So he could have a history of trespassing, okay?
Sure.
And where it was pleaded down by some lawyer, some defense lawyer, and he paid a fine, or it was ran off as a misdemeanor, not as a felony. He was really looking in somebody's house, but they couldn't prove he was looking in, so the cops could only hit him with trespassing. You follow me? Or something like that. It was pled down or whatever. But there's a history here. There's a history here of B&Es, trespass, voyeurism, something like that earlier on. This guy just didn't jump, to breaking into a house and coming in on a girl, or this guy just didn't jump on a trail that's being ran on by other people to commit a brutal murder and sexually dominate, some woman and take her and haul her away into a tunnel and hide her out in the tunnel. I mean, this guy has evolved.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy has evolved, but he's got big problems now. Because we're learning more and more about him, profiles coming together, and the puzzles coming together too, I mean, something else that is interesting to me, what do you think he looks like now? Because we have a sketch of him. We know that goes back, I don't know, I guess almost a year, whatever. And that's what he looks like then. But the guy can't be as dumb as a rock, right? or could he? Because, he knows he's been seen. So he's leaving that house. He's thinking to himself, they know what I look like. Right?
Yeah.
So now, you being the artist you are, tell me, what would he do? Grow a mustache, grow a beard, let his hair grow long? He's got to change his looks.
Oh, he's absolutely got
his looks are changed. He probably don't look like that sketch now.
No, he probably does.
He may. But let's add some stuff to it. He can't. I mean, he's got the deformed deer. Would he grow his hair long to hide that deformed deer or that damaged deer or whatever it is? I mean, what would you do to disguise yourself if you were him?
Well, and you kind of going back to the hat thing, it's one of the, and it isn't a recent trend, but a lot of guys, you see this in the sports world an awful lot, especially like motorsport stuff, motorcycle world where I've been, guys will buy caps, and they kind of tuck the tops of their ears in so the cap sits nice and low and it's kind of a stylish look. So if he's got a deformed ear, man, easily the most obvious thing, but yeah, grow your hair out. But he could, if he's still wearing a cap, he's going to be wearing it low. He's going to be tucking his ears in, and that is a really common way to wear a hat. And it really touches on something, John, you mentioned before about this guy, being athletic and, being physically fit and maintain and control. If this guy is that physically fit and he's got that type of personality, man, if he's interacting with people at the gym, I mean, anybody that's watching, that's a good place to kind of keep an eye out for somebody that might, because there's no way he's going to just stop working out. He's not going to just give up taking care of himself, you know, and somebody that's that physically fit, in the athletic world, when you're good looking and you're in shape, it disarms people a lot. So this guy is probably easily moving around socially, and one of the reasons he may not have been caught is people just can't believe that he actually did anything like that. He
But
might be.
that's when, yeah, that's how it usually goes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's hard for people, it's one thing for people to look at somebody like me with an older dude that's kind of rough looking, a lot of tattoos, a lot of money, great. Like, yeah, I can see that dude being up to no good, right? But, for somebody that's super clean cut that doesn't have a ton of ink, and if he has any ability to communicate, certainly that's going to lower people's guard an awful lot, which would also explain, if he's able to access some of these women, that is the best way to do it, have kind of some sort of, means of communication that kind of drops people's guard about it and kind of lets them in a little bit so he can start to triangulate what his next move is going to be. But yeah, the hat thing for sure. Yeah, this guy could be growing a beard. Again, I can't see him changing his physical appearance that much, but if you're wearing shorts and a baggy shirt, it'd be hard to tell if the guy's working out or not. So, that's great cover for him. And people would be surprised, I think, if you're doing surveillance on somebody, how a little thing like a hat or just kind of changing your general mode of dress really throw people up. People kind of get in their mind sometimes like that a person looks a certain way or is going to, present themselves a certain way. And it doesn't take a lot to kind of skew that, image in people's minds of what they expect somebody to look like. So for sure, he could be doing all of that. And, it'll be interesting to see when they do finally catch this guy, when we start getting some answers. Like, I think those pieces are going to we'll start finding out what he actually has been doing.
Last question, Dustin. What's going through his mind now that they have the sketch out there, and there is no doubt that he's seen it? Based
Yeah.
on his age, I got to believe he's all over the internet looking for himself and looking at every show everybody is doing on him. So he's trying to get an idea of how close people are to him. He's
Yeah.
probably even watching us or will watch us at some point. Okay.
Sure.
Bottom line, I think the guy's toast. Okay. I think the guy's toast because now there's a lot more to work with, a lot more information coming out.
Yeah.
We see a good sketch of him. We can kind of point out his visual
Mhm.
aspects and focus in on them a lot more. But what's going through his mind now? What's going
Yeah,
through his mind now? Now he knows people all around the country. Millions of people know what he looks like.
yeah, that's a great question, John. I think it could easily boil down to like how full of himself this guy really is. I mean, because we know he's not afraid of risk for sure. But he's, as you said, he didn't just start breaking into high risk locations and committing broad daylight murders. I mean, this guy's got a history somewhere. So he's been getting away with this stuff for a while, certainly more than just the last year. I mean, that's a hell of a resume just in the last year too. So you got to believe, yeah, whatever came before, if he's got a felony now, and I don't know how this is for every state, but in a lot of places, even for non-felony arrests, they're taking your DNA. So if he's not in the database, he's been kicked loose a few times. So he's got some confidence moving forward. Now, yeah, he may know that he's all over the internet, and I believe he would. He has to be watching. He has to be paying attention to that. But if this guy is really that full of himself and he's been getting away with it all this time, I think two things are going to happen. He's either going to just kind of continue on doing what he's been doing, with complete disregard for the risk, which is I could totally see. Or, you know, the pressure. I mean, this guy, like you said, John, he's not the sharpest bulb on the tree. You know, is that pressure is he gonna really slip up now? Is he gonna start making some mistakes? Because so far, you know, regardless of what he's done, he's still batting 100%.
Yeah,
You know,
so far he's batting 100,
yeah,
batting 1,000. Yeah, I mean, nobody's got him on anything so far that we know of.
that's right. And if he's feeling the pressure, I mean, like you said, John, like this guy's got a certain behavioral, you know, mode going on. He can't resist that juice. He cannot resist it. So it's going to be interesting to see how the pressure that law enforcement and now the public, now that we have this sketch, because that amplifies things exponentially. It's one thing to know that the cops are after you. I mean, hell, I know guys now that you know they're always up to stuff. I don't care what the cops say unless the cops are busting their door down. They're just, yeah, they're screw it, man. You know, let them come get me.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
don't give it. There's
but
people
it's
that don't
another
give
thing.
it a second.
Yeah, you know, because that's their way of life, and that's just they accept that as part of how, you know, they just accept that as part of their lifestyle. But those guys do not have their face plastered all over every major news outlet. They're not being talked about, you know, on the forums or social media. They don't have a sketch of their face being circulated everywhere, you know. Now, and not to mention this guy's got DNA. So, and that kind of, you know, as an investigator, yeah, as an investigator, you know, and I know law enforcement's thought of this, but just to kind of reiterate it, now that we know what that guy looks like, we know somebody has contact with him. He didn't grow up in a vacuum. They're going to be knocking on doors, to, you know, and I have to believe they're going to be looking for women in his life, and that he has to know that because he has to have burned people. He has to have burned people. I mean, it's one thing to, you know, have a relationship that not doesn't work out, but if this guy's committing broad daylight brutal murders and home invasions, there's a good chance he's been abusing women somewhere in his past too, not to mention the voyeurism and the trespassing stuff. I mean, he couldn't just, I can't see this guy necessarily being just an awesome partner to some woman, you know, especially if they have a kid together. Now that this is out, I mean, that's going to apply some pressure out on the streets too with his interactions, you know, whether male or female, because you better believe law enforcement is, you know, looking through every neighborhood. They're looking at every area. They're going through anybody they think that he might have known up to this point. But somebody's going to recognize him. When they do, that's going to narrow things down geographically, you know, and demographically, and they're going to hit that hard. So the pressure's on, and it's going to be interesting to see if this, you know, makes this guy slip up. At some point, he's going to have to come up for air. He's going to have to get his fix. He's not going to be able to stay away from it forever.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and it's such a poignant thing that you're always talking about this type of behavior and that you know, addiction component, you know, because we both come from that addiction component, and like we know, like you just don't walk away from it, and especially when you start getting into like committing murder, like we know these guys don't just stop. So if he's getting that big of a rush from committing murder, man, it's going to be, you know, people need to like really kind of be paying attention who they're interacting with. And, you know, certainly if somebody's ever seen this guy or known this guy in their past, and somebody has, hey, you know, be aware because the heat's coming, man, and it's going to come hard.
Well, I'll tell you what, as far as sketching goes, folks, remember we're putting a link up for Dustin's artwork. Okay, take a look at what he's done. All right, he's a very good artist, and he is extremely knowledgeable, as we have seen here today. And also, we'll put up a number for law enforcement. And if anybody has any tips or you have any idea who this guy is, don't be afraid of being wrong. Ask the cops to keep your confidentiality until they nail down you're right. You pick up the reward. And, you know, we'll see what happens. We'll see, you know, what's going to be the future for this character. Hopefully they get him sooner or later before he kills another woman. I'm afraid he has already, to be honest with you. Time will tell. We shall see. Okay. most importantly, I want to thank you, Dustin, so much for coming on today. You're truly a gem. You really, have a focus a lot of other people don't have, and it's beautiful that we can have you as a very valuable resource. We really appreciate you. And to the audience, thank you so much for all your feedback, all your kind comments. Please continue to comment. Please continue to subscribe. We love your comments, love your subscriptions, and make it a great day. And until we meet again, God bless and thank you all.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for having me back, and thanks to the audience too. They're always got great comments down in the comment section. They always got, reaching out to me, got good things to say. It's always great to interact with them. So thanks to you guys as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.